Hey there, and welcome to the AI Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Joseph, and today we're very lucky to have Ian Ozsvald on the podcast. It's the first return guest. Ian is back. Yay! Hey there, Ian. Great to have you back on the show.
Very good to be back, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, and of course, because you've been on the show already, we've already covered your technology origin story. So I think it's a first for the show. It's time to have a technology origin update. I mean, I guess, was it more than a year ago that we originally, I
Mm.
can't remember when I'm going to have to look back through our catalog here. It was certainly, I mean, it feels like a different world that we're living in than when we first
I think it
spoke.
was it was about a year ago, I think. So pre my play groups, when I was in the midst of the private equity startup, um, still building my Rebel AI leadership group at the time. Um, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, what's happened since then? High level. I built a whole new thing, a whole new community called Playgroup, which we could dig into. You're one of my playgroupers, that whimsically named after observing my son having fun after school on his playgroups, and Dad realizing Dad wasn't having fun and Dad wanted to have fun. So we can dig into that, and the one that you helped me run, which I'm dead keen to have the follow up to that with comedic generation.
Mm.
So we should talk about that, and the private equity firm I've been in with a strong AI push. Use agents for coding, explore agents, chatbots, whatever for client work. And then me there running a weekly call amongst the development, but running a weekly call internally, trying to figure out, socialize, what's working with the world of agents and what isn't working. So taking a dispassionate scientific view, not just the hype, and saying, right, what did work? What did we do that didn't work? And we could just talk about that so no one else does the thing that didn't work. And what should we do more of? What is actually working? And let's just try and separate all the blather from all the billionaires against what actually pragmatically is giving us value and is driving us forwards. And so I've really enjoyed digging into those areas. And I don't know, has anything else happened? I guess we had our conference for Pi Data London again this year. That went very well. And our meetup for Pi Data carries on. And in general, in London, there's just so many LLM meetups and Claw meetups, and I've been to a bunch of those, and I'm still bewildered by the breadth of what's going on in the space of LLM and Gen AI. And it's just tricky keeping up with it, even when I've got a 70-person play group of really bright, switched on, motivated people, and I'm attending these events. So there you go. That's, I reckon, is kind of the high level of what's happened
Yeah, yeah. No, fantastic.
last
Well,
year. What do you want to dig into?
and I was just going to mention I got the actual date. So it was January last year that we spoke. So it's been
Wow.
18 months.
Yeah.
And I mean, perhaps in follow-up questions we can get into. I mean, there's obviously the big changes in the background. Of course, I'll refer to the listeners to do check out the first episode with Ian and for all of his background and if that's a little summary. Of course, the founder of the Pi Data conference and doing exciting things. Ian is also the founder of the Rebel AI community, out of which this podcast was born, and I think there's been evolution there, hasn't there? I mean, I guess maybe let's start because I mean, 18 months ago, Rebel AI was in a particular form. I mean, since then also, I mean, I stepped back from Rebel AI because I had a new job in which I had less of a leadership thing, but I got involved in your new playgroup. I mean, I think, yeah, why don't we focus on the evolution of Rebel AI and Playgroup
Hmm.
over the last 18 months?
Sure. Sure. So, okay. Two different things, different communities that I own both of them. Um, Rebel, I put together on the as a Rebel AI, doing leadership different. I put that together on the observation that over 10 years, with me doing strategic engagements in companies, going in to help a data science team that was perceived as failing to help them get over the line, deliver a project, become highly performant. Often I would find that management had asked the wrong questions. There was a bright team of people. They were doing the thing that they thought was important, but maybe it was like a multi-year research project and management wanted a multi-month delivery. And then my job was to go and spot the two different sides and bring them together, figure out where the easy wins and the bigger wins were, put in place a plan and deliver it. Great. That was my strategic engagements. And I've done a whole bunch of those, had some $1 million outcomes for clients, big corporates, startups, raising money, all sorts. But each time I did that, I realized I was kind of making it up as I went along. There was no book to read on how to successfully deliver data science projects in our rapidly evolving world. Through sort of the rise of scikit-learn and traditional machine learning, and then deep learning, and then now in our Gen AI world. So I went back to a bunch of my leaders that I'd helped to grow into their roles, and where I'd set them up with good project design so they could be very successful in their organization, and said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we had a safe space where we could meet and talk about the things that we don't understand how to solve yet, because we're all on different journeys. And they all said, great, Ian, go and organize it. So I put together Rebel AI. It was a private paid community, and I'd sell it as a private safe space where we could say only one person per organization can join. So it's a safe space. And we could talk bluntly about, hey, this works, this doesn't work. I've been asked to do this thing. I've got objectives. I've got to grow my team. I've got to fire some people. I haven't got buy-in across the organization. Nobody trusts our output. How do we deal with these things? And then we'd meet every month. And Sam, you were an active part of that. And we talk through members' issues and come up with constructive plans for them, and then check in by Slack. That was brilliant for the first couple of years. Somewhere last year, over the course of the year, and certainly by Christmas last year, everyone's time is smashed. All of my leaders couldn't commit to 1 2 hour session once a month. And it was quite a stark change from the previous couple of years where everyone was happy to make time for it. And it could, of course, be it wasn't touching the mark. It wasn't doing the right job. And so people just weren't attending. But everyone assured me they wanted to be there, but their CEO would smash their diary the day before and then they couldn't attend. And it was getting increasingly hard. So I decided in good faith, I couldn't charge for this if I couldn't give the community the value that we wanted. So a couple of months ago, I decided, right, I'm going to stop charging for it. It still continues as a private safe space for data science leaders, curated group. I interview everyone, but we're moving to a more decentralized, community-owned model internally. Everyone's very excited about that. I get to stop being the tyrant, sort of taking the benevolent dictator for life, but the tyrant model of the patrician in Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels. So rather than me organizing everything every month, instead we're going to decentralize that and change sort of kind of the governance mode. And then see how we evolve and see where it gets to. Still meeting every month online, still meeting with Slack, still meeting physically in London, which is great for those in London, less great for those across the UK and across Europe with our decentralized membership. I figure that's an example of a community that's having to learn a different role in the changing world. Particularly, I think this changing economic cycle. Everyone's gone crazy for AI, justifying AI drives layoffs. Whether it does or doesn't is a different thing. Maybe the layoffs are due to overhiring in the COVID era, and there's all sorts of weird interplays going on. Doesn't matter why, there are these headwinds that have occurred. The outcome is that people are very smashed for time, certainly leaders being asked to do too many things, and their greater leadership, their executive leadership team, probably not knowing what it means to add AI everywhere, but they want AI everywhere because everyone else is doing it. And then we're in that sort of difficult place where you can't say, I know it's not going to work because we haven't tried it, even though you might have evidence all around you. So you have to try it. And so it becomes another thing that's an easy win on top of all your other easy wins. And then your calendar gets smashed. And it turns out the devil is in the details. And lots of companies aren't finding easy wins with all of their AI initiatives, starting with agentic code development through to other areas. I mean, agentic code development, that's definitely doing a lot better than many other process optimization areas with agents. But it's not the case that we've suddenly replaced the white collar workforce with agents, and we haven't suddenly replaced coders. The roles are evolving, and companies are having to change. And so that's fascinating. And I wish my leadership group had more time to talk about all of this, but it doesn't. So we're changing how we run that. But it carries on as a private safe space. And if there are data science leaders, specifically data science leaders, so people who have come up the data science track, very numerate, you care about your results, but you discover that on the management level, things operate differently. People operate differently. And you want a private safe space, maybe reach out and have a chat with me over LinkedIn, and we can see if that's a useful community for you to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we'll get your LinkedIn in the show notes, and then I think they've also got your website for Rebel AI, and just add I think Rebel AI extraordinarily useful. In my previous role, I was running a small team, and being able to talk to other team leads was extremely, extremely helpful. And in my new role, I'm in sort of more in an IC situation, and so yeah, like the playgroup became the sort of the more relevant for me. But I think absolutely for
Yep.
anybody in a leadership role where you're leading a team, and to have, I mean, I think what was particularly eye-opening is that when you're in those leadership roles in your own company and you're busy taking what would you say, support flack from either direction, it can you know, and it can be quite overwhelming. And what was I particularly remember through multiple sessions of the Rebel AI is hearing about people in other organizations talking about the same thing or variations of that. And you know, I think it's a bit like, you know, it's very easy to become obsessed with your own problems, and then part of what makes your own problems a bit more manageable is realizing other people have them, and in some cases, some people are in much more difficult situation. And yeah, the advice and support, the model of encouraging everybody to contribute and share. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I shamelessly stole that for our Python leadership community, where we do the same thing on a similar cadence.
Certainly on that point, I've had a lot of leaders come in saying, I believed when I joined that my problems were unique to me, and then I'm
Mm,
the sole data science leader. I can't tell my boss I can't solve this. I can't tell those that report to me that I can't solve this, and I don't know what to do about it. And then it turns out everyone else has got a similar problem to me. And leadership problems, hey, they're just management problems.
yeah.
Okay, we've got specific things with data science, getting information and signal out of raw data, and then enacting change. But enacting change on an organization through a project, that's a well-worn management track. There's a slightly different twist on it, but it's the same old problems. And a lot of it comes down to managing squishy humans,
Mm,
almost never down to the data and the technology. It's around those management relationships. And so figuring out in a safe space how to have those awkward conversations or champion the right ones, sell the right idea, get people on side, deliver things through, sell your team's success, prioritize the right thing. Don't just be a happy geek and solve the next problem right in front of you. All of that jazz. Yeah, it turns out it's a kind of we have a well-worn set of these paths that we go over and over because we keep facing them. So yeah, it's a nice place to talk about that,
yeah,
and not to
brilliant.
feel alone, which is the important bit on that leadership journey.
Brilliant. And I think that, you know, you're adapting to the economic changes, and you know, as a result, you know, so for some people for whom, I mean, actually, I mean, I did like, well, I won't go into the sort of side detail there, but yeah, sometimes the block can be, can you get funding from your organization for this thing? And so this is going to be open to now a few more people, and I think
Yeah, I
that's a
think so.
great
Yeah.
resource to allow them. But then, so yeah, so it sort of kind of, as you know, in parallel to some degree with off shift, playgroup was emerging, and I think
Right.
the
So
first of those, yeah, last year. Well, do go ahead.
yeah, so well, I mean, yeah, turns out I've got a habit of community building. So go back 20 odd years, and I was running my £5 app with a friend, John, down in Brighton, a meetup for about 30 people in Brighton, a tech meetup celebrating lightweight 5 LB, sort of British imperial units, and £5 symbols, so small money, startups, initiatives, projects, anything. And we just met every month, talked about them. It was like a proto meetup that we knew later on.
Yeah,
And then Pi Data London, that you've mentioned, I co-founded that 12 years ago, now 16,000 members, lots of monthly volunteering for the meetup and then for the conference. My Rebel AI leadership group, 30 leaders working in a private safe space as I've learned to evolve that format. I've taken some of the leadership ideas there and I run them at the conference in a leadership session there, open invite for all the leaders that attend the conference. And then my play group, well, I sat back and just thought, you know, as much as I enjoy my leadership and my strategic work, and I'm very good at it. I've got these $1 million outcomes. Clients ask me to come back, and now I can do all of that. It's a bit lonely at times, making up, trying to figure out and diagnose what's going on, but also diagnosing is fun. I really enjoy that debugging of the human thing. But what I really want to do is get better at my technical leadership. And that goes back to my research beginnings 26 years ago in a research firm out of my master's degree, where I skipped doing a PhD because I wanted to join a research firm. And then I've sort of been up and down on that journey over the decades. And then I thought, screw it. I mean, I watch my son having fun when I go and pick him up from his after school clubs, and prior to that from nursery. Daddy's not having fun. Daddy's barely over his sleep deprivation from having a small child. And then it's like, oh, actually, I'm over my sleep deprivation. I am beginning to have fun. I want to have fun in the company of other bright-minded, driven individuals. So I invited 15 smart colleagues to a playgroup event, whimsically named Playgroup, to come and play with me in a group on the ArcAGI challenge. That was middle of last year. And then it was so successful, I ran another one a month later. And then I forget, Sam, was it the third one that we did comedy with you? Was it? It was one of the early ones with the comedy one.
it
It
was.
might have been a bit later on, but it's one
It
of
could
the
have been
early
the
ones.
third one. Certainly, I remember that the first two were focused on the Arc
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, so
Yes,
it's
which are
abstraction
very,
and
very, very
reasoning
enjoyable.
corpus, really hard to challenge, designed to show that LLMs are an evolutionary dead end for the $1 million prize. Nobody claimed the $1 million prize. There's another iteration this year. And in fact, we're meeting next Friday, 15 of us to go and work on the fourth iteration of the ARC play group, which is really nice. But you very kindly put up your challenge, Sam, that you wanted to work on making, can we make GPT funny?
Mm,
So not can we make it think it's making a joke, or it tells us an obvious not joke, but can it give you more grist for your mill for your own comedic adventures? And that led us to some really interesting insights that day. I mean, for me, it was playing with the obliterated models and
yes,
stripping away the
yes.
guardrails, and then having incredibly crude, not very funny jokes
Mm,
coming out, but stuff
mm.
that a guardrailed model couldn't say. And that was a wonderful little sort of side adventure for me. But what do you remember of that day? Because the fact that you ran one of these days, what do you remember? How did that play group go for you?
Well, I think I mean the big thing for the playgroup when you're running it as opposed to being in it, like the first two with the arc, that was a great chance to sort of like play around. Then as running it, and I was sort of in your shoes, you've got a lot more responsibility, and so I had been doing my own sort of like line of like sort of comedy AI research leading up to that, and so it was sort of the day for me was more about sharing those ideas. I didn't really get to develop those ideas, but it was great to see people like yourself taking different angles that I hadn't considered, like the obliterated models, and sort of so it was great learning there. Obviously, we also had the professional comedian Callum Mackenzie in there,
You did an
and
amazing job teaching us the theory of comedy. I had no idea there was a theory of comedy.
indeed, and so I mean, I think it was for me that particular day was great fun for the connections. I think running it, you don't get to do so much of your experimentation, but of course, then there was the fourth one, and I forget what the theme was, but I think it was like the Nano
That the
GPT,
fine We
like
did fine tuning of Nano GPT. So Andre Karpathy's lightweight PyTorch GPT-2 implementation that you can run on a regular CPU laptop or
right.
with a GPU or in the cloud with H100s that we rented,
Well, that was
and then
that
go
was the
and have
thing,
fun.
yeah, yeah. Well, that was so that was then the fourth one that you ran, and then I was then in the audience, and of course, like my previous like actually that year's Pi Data or the previous one, I had like presented my because I'd run through a similar sort of thing with the not jokes, and but so I kind of like used that as an opportunity because you provided the H100 to then do like LoRa fine tuning and I mean there are things on I'll put the links and LinkedIn my comedy psychosis parts 1 2 and I think 3 coming where I like ended up upgrading to Cursor Ultra and on into the night felt like I had got to the point where I had created a prompt with possibly Opus 4.6 or 4.7 that was well I ended up creating a comedy originality detector, and it did seem that I'd actually got it to create some things that didn't exist in any existing joke databases that we could find, and so you could argue there was some aspects of creativity here. But the mission continues. But yeah, that was absolutely fantastic journey there.
For me, it was lovely because, as you say, the first two that I ran, presenting 2 years worth of my own work on the ArcAGI project, I was in the hot seat. I was presenting all of my material. I was so enthused to have a group of people in the room who could come and play with me. And then I didn't get to type anything because I was
Right,
talking a
right.
lot and checking in with people. So for your one, I got to play and got the obliterated models working, and then that was lovely. And then the fine tuning with Nano GPT that we did afterwards. It was brilliant to have a date in the diary where I had to get PyTorch running with Nano GPT, create some of my own data sets. So I got not just the Shakespeare example that Karpathy provides, but a Python code set from the Rosetta project, and a Gutenberg collection of Victorian texts and a couple of other data sets. Figure out how it all worked, go through the code because, hey, it's only a few hundred lines. How hard can it be to understand? And it turns out the answer is quite hard. And then put together a bit of a syllabus for the day. And then, as I've been learning each time I do it, I put too much in the syllabus. You've got to simplify it. But that day we played a lot. I rented some H100s. You did some fine tuning of your own stuff. We did some fine tuning with these models. It led to the end of the day in the pub, the observation. Wow, we've got it running. Nano GPT is amazing. We fine tuned it. We don't know how it works. So what do we do about that? So we then had some calls, some virtual mini play groups on a Friday morning, sort of 5 to 10 people on the call, as we just basically put some breakpoints in the code and worked it through I think I had my cursor up and we were just stepping through the code, figuring out how pieces were working. And I thought, this is brilliant. Now I've got a little research lab of colleagues sitting around with me, figuring out how this works. This is amazing. Um, then we had another, I forget the sequencing now, but we did another play group on building. More recently, we did building bits of GPT. So I made variants of the model.py file where I deleted critical bits, like I deleted self-attention, the 5 lines that calculate it, or I deleted the MLP configuration, or I deleted one of the normalization sections. And then the instruction was just, look, here we go. This is the output that you want from this function. These are the inputs. You fill in the couple of lines in between, sit with people in the room, talk it through, and reason about it. And the exercise I set there was when everyone came to the room, I said, right, ignore your laptops, draw the transformer architecture on paper. And everyone went, oh, I know how to do that. And then most of the room said, oh, actually, I don't know how to do that. Here's my rough drawing. And at the end of the day, we repeated the exercise and people realized they had more boxes they could draw in. They had a better mental model as to what was working and go to the exercises. So I'm also enjoying building up better techniques for teaching and getting people to educate and challenge their assumptions. Because I've been teaching, running my own private courses around data science for a decade. And I've been reading a book on improv, partly from hearing about your comedic adventures, Sam, just trying to figure out, right, how do I better express playing with ideas and exploring and normalizing success and failure and just making it all friendly and fun, but at the same time pushing everyone, including myself, into new areas so we get something out of what, when you've got 8 hours, I've got people in the room presenting techniques, the show and tells from outside the real world, the best use cases of Claude and Codex and whatever, or a paper they've read and a book they like and a technique they've developed, like Kapadi's LLM wiki has come up a couple of times. People have been presenting that. You've got that. You've got presenting an idea that we want to follow in a day, like building bits of GPT. You've got everyone saying, I don't know how to do that. I don't even know how to install PyTorch. And then getting people up and running and then productively getting to an output before we go to the pub at 4 o'clock. That's a lot to squeeze into 8 hours before your glucose runs out and your brain goes dry. So I'm getting better at running all of that and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. We did one with the Full Fact, the non-partisan fact-checking agency or company, helping them exploit some of their data internally, just vibe coding up a bunch of apps. And thankfully, David there spent a lot of time preparing internal potential prototypes, so a problem spec and some data. And then a group of us smashed out a bunch of ideas and presented those to his company afterwards and explored that. And I'd love to go and do some exploration of company rooted ideas with my playgroup fellows. We've got RKGI 2026 coming up next Friday in a month's time. I'm looking to do one on LLM security, so hacking LLMs, probably using the Lakera Gandalf challenge, which is a really nice online security challenge. You try and subvert the chatbot to get it to reveal its password through multiple levels. But they put up a whole bunch of new challenges that I haven't tried, your email-based phishing attempts and all sorts, all the stuff that we're going to have to deal with in our organizations as technology leaders when our companies try lots of different AI enablement strategies, and then other people start messing around with it because humans, it turns out, can be a bit naughty, either for fun or maliciously, or trying to exploit, steal money, use you as a spamming platform, whatever. And so I want a bunch of my group to get ahead of that. I want to be ahead of that for my strategic engagements. And I'd love more people to propose ideas that we can work on. So Sam, I want you to come back and do a follow-up to your comedy one.
Well, and I'm just thinking, talking of ideas. I mean, like, I've been sort of watching enviously as the playgroup evolves, and I've been very busy at work and been trying to make progress there. Although I think things are sort of stabling down, but settling down. It makes me think. Well, and this is maybe taking strings from your bow, but like sort of like how PyData London ultimately became a PyData conference. I wonder, would it be completely insane to have a playgroup conference where you did a full week and like just really locked in? And it's, I think partly, I mean, this is a reflection of like also what one can get funding for is like yeah, I'm sort of, it maybe like counterintuitive, but it's almost like sometimes like taking one day out of the week is less easy than saying, right, this is going to be my full week for this full focus on this one thing. But yeah, I would I think, where am I? I mean, there were very
But I
strange
would
things
love to
happening.
do longer events, and I want to try bigger events. I've had a couple of venues at the moment. I've got a couple of, thankfully, I've got a couple of CTOs, heads of
Yeah,
AI, who can spring me a boardroom for 15, 20 people.
yeah.
I've got one venue that might do a 50 person or possibly up to a couple of hundred people event. That'll be bit of a nightmare to organize. So I'm a little bit
Yeah.
hesitant about that, but I would love to get more people in the room because a wide variety of people, those that are technically like LLM very competent, they're driving the APIs all the time, and those that are on the outside but are bright people, they will bring very different views upon the problem
Yeah.
solving. So I'd love to organize a bigger event, a little bit hesitant there. But I want to run a multi-day event. But then I've had some members say, like, Ian, it'd be much easier if you just did like a Saturday, Sunday. It's like, well, it might be for you, but you haven't got a family. So I'm
Yeah,
not doing
indeed.
that. Weekends are family time. And then it means people taking time off of work. One day they can justify some of them as like an unpaid training day or a paid training day or whatever.
Right, right.
But I would love to do like 2 days, or it might be a couple of Fridays in sequence, or we'd be doing like one full Friday in person and then
Mm,
some Zoom calls over following weeks. So there's time to process and mess around and push forward yourself. And I keep playing with different ideas and I'm
yeah.
experimenting. So I'm in a period of experimentation.
Cool.
I've done enough of my strategic gigs to know that I'm really good at those, and I can go and help a company turn around the data science or AI team and get a big objective solved by doing some part-time management. Brilliant. I want to do more of that, but I know I can do that. I've spent a bunch of time helping my private equity client recently come up with a bunch of chatbots, AI enablement, investigating automation of human process, like the CFO's teams, legal process and regulatory process of agents. Explored a whole bunch of that, done a bunch of that. It's great. I really want to dig down into the technical roots, understanding how GPT works at the low level. We had a playgroup call just this morning at 2 hours ago where one of my members he was so inspired by the Zoom call that he missed the other week that he went on in the evening and put a LinkedIn post about it and shared it in the Slack, showing how he did context vector evolution on the word mind. So mind the gap, or you're out of your mind. Context vector evolution of the word mind, and cosine similarity of the mind concept over multiple layers in GPT. And
Ah.
I sat back and thought, I've got no idea what you've done there. That sounds brilliant, Mike. How about we have a call and go through it? And so a couple of us were on the call and we went through it. I videoed it. We'll be sharing it. I'll share it in the Slack later on.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that I've got a bunch of researchers now who are doing their own novel work on their own time and then sharing it back to the community. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, no, well, totally on I of course for some people weekends, yeah, like you like me,
Yeah,
family.
not
No,
doing it.
for me, if I can get some sort of, I mean, if I for obviously a bigger scale, these things will become really complicated, and the people organizing it are not having much time, getting their hands dirty. But I'm sort of imagining like maybe something with like a dozen or a couple of dozen people. I'd love to do a Monday to Friday hackathon, in the guise of a playgroup conference. I mean, if it's up to me, everybody will be working on comedy, but that's another story. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, exciting times. Well, and maybe we'll get links for all of these things for listeners who want to get involved in all the different many ways that they can get involved in Ian's projects. I guess I'm thinking, should we move into like talking about the big swathe of changes that are happening in AI? I mean, I've sort of to a certain extent like put down my experimentation like internally within the LLMs, and I'm sort of working at this you know agent level, agent supported coding. There seems to be an emerging narrative that says November 2025 was a big change. There was a certain, I mean, in some ways you could sort of see it as a sort of a slow progression of improvement of the models. It wasn't necessary. I don't know that there was such a big bang of something in November last year, but I think it was, I don't know, the combination of improvements in the agent harnesses and the LLMs themselves and people's acceptance of them. I think, there was a lot of people who are now looking at it as a sort of a watershed moment where a lot of people who were perhaps on the fence switched from, oh, I'm just doing tab completion on my coding to going full agent. What's your perspective on what's happened?
So yeah, everyone talks about the November change. I mean, I, I don't know about the November change as a hard cutoff point, but
Mm,
certainly the competency of the models was continuously improving.
mm, mm.
I think enough people were experimenting with different ways of using the models that better processes were coming out. Having a coupled design critique loop and then an implementation, where the implementation could be broken up into some kind of sub-stories, tasks. That felt like a useful set of external tooling and process
Mm.
changes around an LLM. So the LLM got better, but also our ways of interacting with it improved. And at the same time, we had crazy things like Steve Yeage's Gas Town, the
Mm.
multi-agent, multi-everything, huge town worth of stuff that builds all the things in a great big loop, and the human just kind of sits back and has a chat every now and again.
Mm.
But that begets the Beads task management system. I played with that for a little while, and that's better probably than having a single markdown document or a set of markdown documents. They've all got trade-offs and support different complexities of task, but that recognition that actually an agent, whenever it discovers a new thing from a plan that we might have written and it loses track of that new thing because there's extra detail in that growing context window. Instead, if it can put that new important thing into a task, just like a human does with a task tracker, we replicate a human process in a way that kind of makes sense to the agent as well. Then the agent can control that and tick it off. And then Claude wrapped in their own task management system, and that conflicted with Beads for a little bit. And so it's interesting watching this huge innovation wheel flying there. And then, as you say, trying to make sense of it is really hard. I mean, for me, I switched between falling into the tooling and trying hard with the tooling. Like I've just been happy with Claude for over 6 months now. Prior to that, it was Codex for about 6 months. Prior to that, I was using the AIDA, AIDER harness, driving DeepSeek and a couple of other models that I was playing with. And at the same time, digging deep into GPT-2's internals in PyTorch and building up our own custom nano GPT training sets and whatever, whilst thinking about the Arc project and how do you use Claude or DeepSeek or Quen or whatever to drive a discovery process in this abstraction and reasoning challenge where the models were never trained on that task. They weren't given a million examples of Arc
Mm.
challenges. They don't exist. And yet they're supposed to solve them. And a human looks at it and they can see this interesting puzzle. And the human goes, oh, I can see that. It's a block sliding puzzle. I'll slide the blocks this way,
Mm.
quick bit of planning, and I've solved it. And the machine goes, it's a number 8 spotting game. And it decides to play the number 8 challenge, which is something it made up. And it gets it wrong. And it's a very different kind of challenge to agentic coding, but with the same models. And I find it fascinating that everyone assumes the model will just be great at this other thing that the human's good at. It's not been trained over there and it's not very good at all. But it is great at the coding and it will clearly soon be better than humans at the coding. And I don't think that the kind of those things necessarily flow out. I've seen enough reports now to say that, yeah, output is up. Definitely, yeah, you can write more code with the models. You can generate more critique, you can do more planning, but
Mm.
also code lifetime is much shorter. Code gets reverted at a far higher rate, like a significant
Mhm.
greater rate. And security vulnerabilities and pernicious bugs seem to be written at a greater rate now.
Mm.
Whether that's because lots of people aren't paying enough attention and they haven't learned to pay enough attention yet, and the models are good, but the humans are kind of sloppy drivers, or
Mm.
whether it's because some people become slop cannons, forcing out that greater output. Look, I've token maxed, give me my bonus. And then it's left to someone down the line saying, hang on a minute, a lot of this is crap. We've got to go and revert it and watch out for these wobbly architectures that are being forced out at this crazy rate and try and keep the product still working. And I don't know how that all balances out. So yeah, I don't have any clear answers. Clearly, I'm waffling a whole bunch of observations there. I'm finding it a fascinating period still. I'm a little bit worried that a bunch of proof of concept initiatives around AI are, well, they just seem to keep on failing. But then I've got a decade's worth of experience watching data science project POCs fail because
Mm.
people forgot to check what the objective was, check that change was possible, check the data was good enough, check you can actually automate, check it's cheap enough at a quality level that's suitable to make it worth automating, be it code generation or automatic document processing or whatever. And I've given a couple of conference talks about failures in my career where I learned the nasty lessons about it's not the technology, it's the people and the process and the possibility of change. And at the same time, I see lots of companies pushing hard on agent code everything. And Sam, I know you're a massive believer in this. I'm less of a massive believer in this. I think we still need to be very careful about for like a wider team. I'm not a spirited and very competent individual, and I put you happily into that category. You know what you're doing with this, you stay on top of it, you get good quality output. I know lots of people who get lots of output, not necessarily good quality output, and not necessarily the right output, but it was the output that was easy to generate. And they look great because they're using agents and they're generating a lot. but then the impacts, that review bottleneck that hits the rest of the team, that's crap. You can't automate that. And if you ignore it, you're just storing up lots more problems. If you haven't got product market fit, maybe you want to run fast and experiment wildly. That's probably not silly. But if you have got product market fit and you're storing up lots of problems in a world where in May we had greater than one supply chain attack per day in NPM and PyPI, greater than one a day for a month sustained, that's not cool when you run your agent in YOLO mode and it starts installing whatever it wants. And I've seen firms not happy to talk about the fact that they've had agents installing stuff which has caused Bitcoin infestations and whatever else in their infrastructure. And it's all weird. And I still can't get my head around it. It's all weird. Sam, what's your observation? You've heard me well on enough there.
Well, I think it's what's really interesting about the connection with the Arc Challenge is I think the Arc Challenge really exposes like an aspect of like this that I believe it's been coined by Kapathi, the jagged intelligence of these systems, which is that when they're operating and they have like one like lots of context, lots of good context for this is how this thing has been solved in the past, and in combination they've also been trained on very similar things. They can absolutely smash some things that would take humans, really extraordinary amount of time. And but then there's also this, and if that was a human being doing that, we would, and I think what most people do is you say, wow, these things they really understand, they really know what they're about. As soon as they go like a little bit further out beyond that, they fall off a cliff in a way that's we're not used to humans doing that, except possibly, like these sort of autistic savants or what have you, who have these very, very specialized areas of ability and then are, not very capable outside of that. And I think that the warning that you put in there is absolutely right. I mean, when I was a believer in agentic coding, is I certainly am doing agentic coding, and in fact, even within the last 2 weeks, it's sort of switched in that I've now. I mean, if we look back over the last, 9 months in my new role, I kind of went in for a very heavy agent grind at the beginning, and it generated things that were working. But then the sort of the code quality and all, like my ability of understanding of what some of it was doing and my
That's
ability to
that's really
defend that
critical, right? Our
was that
competence to understanding what's going on declined if we outsource our thinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I sort of reined back from that and, came about again. But I actually put that challenge, when I started the second project at this new place, I put that challenge the LLMs. I said, look, we're working on this thing now. The problem with the previous project was, my, understanding was not good enough. I mean, I had to do a lot of work like post hoc to reinvigorate my understanding. We need to approach this one in a different approach. And going backwards and forwards, the approach that I took was one. Actually, I turned off the tab code complete, and I had that. I was still having the agent do things and make plans and create testing harnesses for me. But then I was like saying, okay, now I'm going to implement elements of this, and so I
Yeah,
was sort of forcing myself to implement those small parts of it, kind of load bearing ones, I would argue,
yeah,
without any AI support. And so I think that was a good
yeah,
approach. But then
yeah,
I so and then having created code bases where and when you mentioned the sort of the task tracking and so on and the beads and I mean I'm not sure what has actually come out. I mean there's clearly this sort of like agent frothing at the mouth thing where you're we'll come onto OpenClaw, but the what was I say that yeah like oh no, my brain has crashed. Oh, the task tracking. I've just started using StrictDoc, which is like a
yeah.
Python sort of requirements management tracking system, and having the AIs working with that. And it also allows you to kind of like run deterministic processes to check. Do you have any orphaned requirements? Are your requirements represented in tests and in code and so on? And I think that's
Right.
I've also been having like a lot of this kind of TDD ping pong with the agents, and then having like the top frontier models ping pong with each other and so on. And it's got to the point now where I've kind of basically I've stopped asking. This is a change in the last 2 weeks. Cursor to ask me for permissions. I've got it back into this mode where it's just doing stuff. But compared to 6 months ago, what I've got is a much tighter harness with rules about, you don't push, you don't take any like, draft PRs all over the place. Right? You don't push any comments. You don't do anything that would interact that would cause members of my team or anything to start reviewing stuff or start whatever without my permission. Everything is very strictly TDD. Specify the failure you have up front. But I've got it with these rules, but I've got it running, and it is generating huge loads of things for me, which is being extremely productive. There's a particular pattern of having Python scripts, then deterministic, that generate Excel, where the Excel, it's generating the Excel formulas, and then I'm using this thing called Formulizer so that it can, also read the outputs, and then I'm having it like sort of get all of its analysis into Python notebooks. So there's a huge loads of things going on. But while I think you know, I say I'm in that, agent soup. There is I still detect these points where it's kind of like, oh no, you're going off on one on there. We've got all of these things, and I have to keep reining it back in occasionally. But I think I've got enough guardrails in there now that I can, leave it running in the background. But I still see these little gaps, where I think a human who really understood this domain would not make that
Yeah.
mistake. And
Yeah.
and so, I mean, the really interesting question is, of course, like Mythos Fable sort of came out and has been taken away from us. Was that gap going to be closed? Has it been closed? Might it be closed in the next year? I don't know. But at this point, yeah, there's some very capable models, but you've got to be really working hard with your harness and really watching them closely for those points where they go where they sort of lose their footing, because the thing is, now that you've given them that much power, if you let them lose the footing, you can suddenly have whoa, like and I just yesterday and today I was sort of debugging like a kind of just to give it an example, make it specific, but there's a couple of things of like, these are little, what it's almost like the goblins thing with ChatGPT. You heard this, where it's sort of somehow well, there was the thing where there was a trend in it increasingly talking about goblins,
Mhm.
and they tracked it down to kind of like a sort of a feedback loop in the training process, and the
Right.
interaction with certain humans. There was like, so for example, we had a spreadsheet that had an error that the analyst who created the spreadsheet said, oh yes, that's a simple error, that what have you. And I still had that as a kind of like, it was there in the notes for the project or what have you, but it's kind of like, no, well, that's been fixed. We don't need to keep mentioning that and re-mentioning that as we go forward. It's just providing noise and sort of, and there was another little, and actually, but basically what I've got now, and this is part of like the process of like getting all of our previous requirements management into StrictDoc, is basically purging out all of the bits of the context that are kind of, well, this has been fixed. We don't need an ongoing, it's done. Like, we don't need an ongoing note of that, and to keep taking it into account in every next
Yeah.
iteration of a project and the Rex and so on. So yeah, there's this sort of like giving the agents a lot more control, but then very, very rigorous review and being ruthless with like purging out the bits of context that are actually just getting
Yeah,
in
and
the
that
way.
context management is critical. So you need to have a human who's on it. But they know which context is critical because they've got a mental model that's there. So they've got critical thinking at play. I've come across some people who have said, yeah, it's really weird. Every now and again, my manager gets annoyed at me because the code wasn't working. And I tell them, it's what Claude wrote, right? It wasn't my job. I checked in what Claude wrote. So, no, no, no. It's your job. You're the one who
Mm,
checked it in.
mm,
Your
mm,
problem. No, but that's not, it's not the world we live in. Well, it is, because
mm,
you're the master in charge of that process, whatever mechanization you've got behind it. So you need humans who are competent, who are all over that. That's one thing. Um, but you talked a moment ago about would Mythos close that gap? And one thing that I see is, my sort of view is like, there's this kind of I think about like a bubble. We would
mm,
use like GPT 4.0, maybe I was experimenting with a year and a half back, whatever it was, to edit one file of Python code. And sometimes you'd be like, oh, you've got to rename this. Great. Visual code. You won't let me rename a variable now, but we can ask the model to rename the variable for me. So rename the variable, and it would rename it and then clobber some other bit of code. It's like, well, you just spat some rubbish into the file. This is useless. So we could do like a thing with one file, and then it got better at one file. I mean, you started to give it two or three files, and that context would expand. And then you said, well, look for the architectural pattern across several of these files and tell me if there's a problem. It goes, oh, there's no problem there. You're the best designer ever. So, okay, ignore the sycophancy. Let's be critical and think about the access pattern that we've got here and how this might not scale. Oh, there's a scaling problem. Great. As long as I know enough to ask the right questions, you can point out the problem that I believed was in there, or maybe I knew was in there, and you can propose some solutions. Maybe you can't write the code for it, but maybe you can help me as a trusted colleague, kind of the intern who's read the internet, you can help me as long as I'm guiding you in the right direction. And then we keep on expanding this bubble. And now we're just saying, there's my code base. There's the wiki. It's in date and out of date. There's all the requirements documents from day one. Here's all the emails. There's Slack and all the conversations. Just ingest it and come up with the V2 that will make us more money. Go. And it'll go, sure, I'll do it. And it'll go and do a thing. It'll always do a thing, but it won't do the right thing. So again, we've got to sort of bubble that down. And that you increase your chance of getting the right answer by giving it only the small things to think about. The same as if you've got your intern and said, there's all of this stuff, go and make a good judgment. They're almost certainly not going to. The human would probably say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm suffering a mental crush here. I can't do this. I'm stupid. You go, no, you're not stupid. I'm the idiot for giving you too much stuff to read. Whereas the model goes, sure, of course I can read everything. So in that context management, yeah, it is critical, but also we keep expanding this bubble of stuff we want to give to the machine and the amount we want to delegate to it. When we had Claude Sandbox, and the sandbox will protect it from doing anything malicious. It was easy to get the sandbox in the sandbox to go and read my .m file and my SSH keys. Like, you shouldn't be able to do that, but it wrote some Python code that happily looked up the file system, got past its own filters, and go and do a naughty thing. And so she's like, well, the more I want to give it, the more I have to trust it. But the more I trust it, the more weird stuff might happen, like a 0-day NPM attack or some weird sandbox exfiltration. So we put another layer of management around it with a Docker sandbox, and we hide more things inside there, and we rewrite security keys on the interface. And that makes it better, but also more constrained. But we wouldn't want to give it our email to read just in case someone sent in a naughty email with a prompt injection that it's not protected against. And I think when you talk about like that gap's always expanding because we keep expanding the bubble of stuff we want it to do because we're lazy and we want to just get it to do more of our stuff for us. And I think there's going to be an increasing realization that this is our job. We can go faster. You can use this thing. It's a tool for thought. It's a tool for critique and design and planning. It can be a tool for typing for us, but you can't just outsource all the thinking. You're just going to become stupid, non-good human if we outsource all the thinking and the robot's going to do the wrong thing. So we've got to stay on top of it, no matter how competent the models are. I think for at least this class of models, for like these LLMs, whether it changes with world models and other model types, I've got no idea how to see that feature. But the trend seems pretty like locked in for me at this point.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and well, I mean, it connects with a lot of great stuff that we had at the Pride conference, where people talking about being overwhelmed by the stuff they needed to review. Also very
That
interesting
slot cannon effect, yeah.
talking to a guy from Nvidia who works full time on the OpenClaw thing. Is he's like, well, I just don't review. I mean, like, and there's this thing also as people at work are doing it, which is like you're now you're dealing with the volume of stuff by using the AI as a lens, and I think that was problematic in a serious way a year and 2 years ago, where the AI summary would be not a faithful reproduction. But now, in principle, you can have a very large PR and you can ask an AI to highlight the key load-bearing changes in it, and so you can kind of stay on top of that. And that's an approach. The thing that you're saying there about the bubble increasing, I think the bubble does keep increasing. Like we keep it, but I feel like there's a point where you transition over and it's more like collaborating with a competent human than it is with an autistic savant. And I think that's it's
Yeah,
certainly
sure.
in the last 2 weeks I feel like as regards of like putting up like draft PR. I mean, basically, a lot of the stuff I'm still doing. I'm still looking at all the code, but I'm kind of like I'm not really looking at the code so much in the editor unless there's a particular problem. It's more like I'm saying like you do these things. Create. I mean, what I've got running in the background now is like I've got like 7 sub-agents all working on 7 different aspects of a problem, and they're all each going to put up a draft PR, and then
Mm.
I'm going to be reviewing the draft PRs
Yeah.
later. And now, in terms of it getting working code up into a draft PR, it's competent in the way that a like junior to mid-level engineer would be. I have no
Sure.
concerns about it being able to make sure that the tests are passing, that the things there's some problem with some linting, but it's doing that. There's an element of the reasoning around requirements and around decision making there where it feels like this is more like and like it's got this uneven ability profile. But it's getting better there. I feel like even with these models, I mean, as we keep expanding the volume of it, we will hit the point where it's like it's more like collaborating with a competent human than it is with a autistic savant, if that makes sense. Because there's still room for the bubble to expand beyond that. It's like, right, go and make me a company that makes loads of money, right? That's going to be,
Mm.
doing that is not that's not an ability that I would assign to a competent human, but a competent human can. And this is, I guess, the key thing is like it's like the
The
Jarvis
CEO's
thing.
job. The
So,
job
so,
of the
so
CEO, the job of the CEO is to make a billion, right?
right, right,
So we do
and this
assign that
is
responsibility to a human. But that context is crazy big and it involves relationships and all
right, right,
sorts of
right.
stuff. That's different to coding in a constrained digital environment where all the relevant data is hopefully available to the machine.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, no, I hear you that it becomes more of a collaborator, and I agree with that. And I tend to use Claude as a collaborator to critique an idea, help me summarize, think through a thing,
Right.
propose alternate solutions. I don't ask it for its thoughts. I ask it to critique me because that way I've got a much better chance of actually getting some probing questions back. They're normally not very good. I get a better conversation with a human. They're certainly for research ideas, much better conversations with other humans, partly from the rubber ducking, where you just talk out loud.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you unlock something, but
Sure.
also the human asking more pointed questions, including, are you sure you're on the right track? Are you just being an idiot? Do you need to do that? Because that, am I even asking the right question? Is a really good one. And Claude will get happily wrapped up into the, you're so clever. Let's go down your incredibly intricate line of thinking if you're not careful. So but yeah, I do use the bot as a clever assistant to help me think. And I think that works really well. And yeah, they are getting clearly better at coding. I just don't think you can. I don't think we'll get to the point where we can delegate that in the large. So you can delegate it for a POC. I don't care about code quality. I don't care
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
color
yeah.
scheme. Make me an interface that does this thing to automate this actually quite complex process. It will knock a thing out, and it will probably do the job. And that's amazing. That's a week's worth of work done in an hour, maybe. That can be amazing. But you don't do that week's worth of work in an hour every hour of your daily life. That's the thing you do every now and again. If you've got a business, you've got a process that works. You've got a money-making machine.
Yeah, yeah,
You're in a
yeah.
money-making machine. I've been working with a money-making machine. At which point you can't keep vibing up new stuff where you don't really care about the quality. If you've got something that works, you care about the quality, otherwise the wheels fall off. And I think at that point, you need the competent human in the loop, working with the competent LLM in its constrained environment, working where its strengths work well. But I suspect that we keep on trying to expand the bubble of its competency, and we'll keep seeing those cracks because we want fewer humans because they're expensive and slow and lazy, and they get tired and distracted, and we want the bot to be automatically working. And so you expand that bubble, and then you get more cracks forming. The models will get better. We keep putting more trillions of investment into them, and it turns out you can cram a lot into trillions of neurons, way more than we ever expected. But there's probably some thermal envelope limit of stuff, energy envelope limit there as to how much you can cram in before the stock market wants its return and the VCs want their return. And maybe it gets a bit weird there, but we haven't hit that point yet. So it's not today's problem.
No, no, and it's interesting the point. I mean, we'll have to wrap up in a moment. The point that you make about your existing business, but that's where I work, they have a very large money making machine,
Yeah.
and all the stuff is. But what's interesting now is, and I've created like a support bot agent that, and like it will now. I'm still checking the code because it's still early days, right? But it will diagnose a production issue and come up with a fix for me, and it's like I think if it carries on like this, like and one of the big things we're putting in is like metrics to track all the times that it gets it correct and all the times
Yeah.
it gets it wrong and what
Nice.
have
Yeah.
you. But if we get to the point where 9,999 times out of 10,000,
Sure.
that it's always doing the right thing,
Yeah.
I think I agree with you that there's always going to be crap. I mean, you can always expand it up to like solve the Middle East crisis or whatever. That you can expand it up to
Yeah.
something that is
Yeah.
like beyond the ken of what have you. I still feel like there is a point that we're potentially on the cusp of where you can collaborate with. It becomes more like working with. And when I say competent human, I don't mean like
Well, I mean, I'll
some.
just don't
Go on.
forget we've been on the cusp of AGI in the next 6 months for several years. We've been on the cusp of replacing the white collar workforce for a couple of years. We haven't. So the narrative is we're on the cusp of, but I'm always curious about what is the reality in the large.
Right, right,
Having
right.
someone who's, I mean, your brain suits working with a group of agents. So
Mm,
you do a brilliant job there. Excellent. That's not most developers. It's a lot of developers get somewhere there. A lot of them can generate a lot of output, but it's not necessarily the right output. You've attuned and developed your own process, and it's taken you what, 6 months to get to a point where you think you're on the let's step up to the next level. Brilliant. That's just not the general developer, even those that have been using these tools for a while. And I'm just going to bring back a practical thing that might help some of the listeners here. So one thing that I've been running in the private equity firm that I've been in is a weekly call called Good Vibes. And it was just a playful name where we meet every week, sort of 10, 20 of the engineers and wider people in the org, and talk about what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so part of my job, because I was pushing the agentic agenda, everyone try Codex and then later try Claude. Stop using autocomplete. It's generally crap inside Copilot, but do use this and don't use this. And look, gas sounds kind of interesting, but it's overkill for us. But it's great that a few of us have been trying it. And having a little Ralph loop can be quite nice some of the times, but also maybe that's a bit overkill. But a planning process is kind of cool. And then I've been encouraging everyone to experiment, socialize what works and socialize what doesn't work, making failure normalized. Failure is totally acceptable. Scientific mindset. We've got to try 10 things that don't work to find the 11th one that actually maybe buys us again. Keep compounding those gains. At the same time, the models are getting better, but we're building confidence across the team to experiment with this new stuff. And then we raise our competency in general. So that's been working really well for like 9 months. We've had a couple of nice things come out of that. One of them was a process change where one of my guys said, Ian, I've come up with a new way of working with Claude. We've smashed out a load of code really quick. I said, great, tell me about it. And it turns out he had taken the initiative to go and get some subject matter experts, get them onto calls, get requirements out of them, get Claude to summarize and make a design document, run it past different SMEs, building up that design doc, bring the experts together to look at the synthesized design doc and critique it. At which point they had a really good spec for a thing they had to make, and then he got Claude to write it. So really, the important thing was the developer went off and got the right people together in a room over virtual calls and made the right plan, and then got Claude to enact the plan at the end. And he thought Claude did it all. So no, actually, you did it all. You
mm,
brought squishy humans together and aligned them. That was amazing as a bit of management. And then one that happened last week was one of my developers said, "Oh, I've been using Claude artifacts." Because doing the PR review process is mentally taxing and it's costly because you change state all the time. So I've been getting Claude to make a diagram of the changes, like a permissions workflow, and it sort of shows a diagram of some permissiony thing, to show what the code was before and after and how it will work. And we have to trust the model's getting it right. But I get to look at this and think about the code and think about the design of that ticket and look at the visual display of the output. And maybe we could get another agent to check that the visual output is the same as the code and that the code matches the spec as a second pair of virtual eyes. But I quite like the idea of generating a visual explainer of the diff, because that's summarization. LLMs are really good at summarization into a visual form, and humans are really good at interpreting complex change in visual form. And so I really like that as a process change for getting these visual explainers for complex diffs so that other people can quickly go, oh, yeah, that doesn't look right, actually. Why doesn't that look right? Let's think about that. Oh, it looks great. I'm just going to sign it off because, it's quite obvious what it's doing. I haven't got to go and read the code. And I think that's kind of interesting as a process change. So I've been encouraging that. So, listeners, if you don't have an equivalent of a weekly Good Vibes call, I would suggest doing that, where you just ask, what's the biggest change you've seen in the last week in the world of AI? Because it's changing so quick. And what's a good thing someone's done? What's something that hasn't worked out that someone's done? Let's talk about it. All experiments are valid. Meet again in a week's time, and then build upon that. Because I think that's a really good way of socializing the acceptance of experimentation, socializing what works and socializing what doesn't, or at least didn't work this time, and maybe we should change the experiment next time. And that's one really good way to stay on top of all of this stuff, is whether we figure out we've got a really competent agent running alongside us that we've just unlocked, or we continuously have to be the taskmaster, the buggy driver with the whip, keeping the horses in line, or whatever weird analogy we want to use. I don't know how it evolves, but it's clearly evolving, so we've got to stay on top of it.
yeah, well,
Right, Sam, I've
absolutely.
probably gone over your time there.
We'll have to wrap up. I mean, I guess, no, I was absolutely. Well, I think the thing that you're talking about, that call, listeners should be getting in touch, to get you involved in their org for exactly that thing. But yeah, maybe I mean, you were very complimentary as like, oh yes, Sam, it's your great ability to work with multi agents. I feel like all of those things are kind of being condensed into the harness. Maybe we're going to end it like this. Is I think by the end of the year, and then you've pushed me before for like, I think that, I'm not talking about AGI. I'm not talking about replacing white collar workers. I think by the end of the year, unless new models do not come out. I think if the models like Mythos and Fable and GPT-5, 6 and whatever come through, like let's say, I mean, I don't believe this. I would imagine it's plausible that by the end of the year, and let's make it fun. Let's say by the end of the year, that when you're collaborating, it's going to be like doing it with a mid-level dev. And I think this is the interesting thing is, of course, even though we have humans, like we don't let them operate in isolation, right? We still do peer review, right? But I think that will be the switch that I anticipate coming is that not that you won't be checking and then you'll still be doing all the things that you're recommending, but that it like there's going to be, oh, okay, no, this is, my robot helper that and I think it's not going to be just me or a few, people on the edge of something. I think probably the majority of software engineers are going to acknowledge, okay, these are as capable as we are.
I think the truth is somewhere in between there. I would suspect that some organizations that have invested, like you've been investing for 6 months with your team, in the right way to
Yeah.
think about this, provide the right context, not all the context, have the context available, have that information available, and then have the right way of designing a process of critique and design
Mm,
and
mm.
review. Those that have invested probably will continue to take increasing returns on these processes,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
might end up with your happy what was the Douglas Adams thing? Your perfect
You,
plastic pal or whatever it was.
your perfect
Your
plastic
happy
pal. Yeah,
robot friend.
yeah.
You're working alongside you,
I
and
think
lots
you
of
ought to know
orgs
I'm
will just
feeling
keep
very
turning on more
depressed.
Copilot, and it won't work, and they'll be confused. So yeah, experiment,
Well,
social up.
let's have you back on in 6 months, and we will review
We'll
exactly where we
see.
are.
Yeah, no, no, no.
I wanted
Super
I wanted
happy.
to
Yeah,
get our perspectives there encoded in the end of the episode, and we
yeah,
can like
sure.
review them in
Yeah,
six
yeah,
months'
yeah,
time
yeah,
and
yeah. Yeah.
see how well.
I am
Fantastic.
happy to modify my opinion in the light of new evidence. Right, super happy.
Indeed, so that's the nature of the true genius. Yeah, brilliant. Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Lovely to
Yeah,
come back on.
we'll get all the links in the show notes, and
Perfect.
yeah, thanks so much, everyone. That wraps up this episode of AI Leadership. If you'd like to be on the podcast or indeed join the Rebel AI community that it all started from, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Sam Joseph. That's sam@neurogrid.com on email, or just DM me on LinkedIn. And please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify. That's how we get in more people's ears. And of course, you can add questions and comments there, or
And
any other things.
feel
Send me a
free to
telepathic link.
reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Just LinkedIn, send me connect and send me a message so I know where you came from, and I'll happily swap notes with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we'll be in all your ears again real soon. Finally, big thanks to our guest today, Ian Ozsvald.
Very happy to be here. Thanks, Sam.